So a big issue I see in a lot of the games that I play is that there are no tanks. Right? People don't really want to play tank. Most of the time, you might get one person on tank, but it's very hard or very difficult to find the two tank comp. Right? People who just insta lock tank and you get two tanks per game. That very rarely happens. Most of the time, I'm the one who has to swap to the second tank, or I'm solo tanking. Right? And not gonna lie, it's kind of trash. You don't really want to solo tank in this game. It's not fun. So many people use a bunch of cooldowns on you. You feel like you're in a pinball machine. So it got me thinking, where are all of the tanks, right? Like, not where are all the tank players, like, NetEase, where are all the tank characters? You know, DPS has like 20 plus characters in it. And we're getting another character, right? Really soon we're getting Blade, I think this Friday or something like that. And it's like, don't get me wrong, I love DPS. I think DPS is a lot of fun. I think a lot of heroes in Marvel lean themselves more towards the kit of DPS, but come on, there are some obvious choices for tanks that I think could be added to the game, and that's more or less what this video is about. I want to show you, or I'm gonna list off a number of tanks that, one, I think just should have been in the base game. Like, there's no reason some of these shouldn't have just been on launch. And I'm also gonna go over a few that I think would make good tank picks. And then I'm gonna go over a few that I'm kind of iffy on. You could maybe make this work, but it would still be kind of fun and interesting to see their take on this character as a tank. So let's get started with, I think, the simplest tank, right? The one that's the most obvious. Hands down, I think everyone would agree this guy should be in the game. So obviously, is Thanos. Come on, it's Thanos, bro. Like, the biggest Marvel movie, the two biggest Marvel movies, and the biggest saga in terms of film history involves Thanos as the main antagonist. How is he not one of the main vanguards in this game? And I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear any excuse to just like, oh, he's too strong, right? If he would be broken, he'd be overpowered. Hulk is in this game. If you don't read the comics, or like if you only watch MCU stuff, you might think, okay, Hulk is like strong, but like he's not broken. No, Hulk is broken in the comics. He is OP. That one of the strongest heroes of all time. Same thing with Thor, right? Thor punches up. He's up there with some of the strongest folks in the Marvel universe. And I also don't want to hear it because Jean is in the game. Phoenix Force is in the game. She solos like every person on the DPS roster and most of the people on the tank roster. Scarlet Witch is in the game. Scarlet, again, solos like 90% of the people on the roster. So I don't want to hear the excuse that the character is too powerful, right, to be added into the game in a balanced way. Scarlet is one of the strongest characters in the Marvel universe, and they made her debatably one of the weakest DPS in the game, right? Like, you can make her work. She can be useful, but it's like her kit is underpowered compared to some of the other characters in the game. So that's not an issue. When it comes to Thanos, I don't know what you would do, right? As long as his ult incorporates the gauntlet in some way, I'm cool. I'm cool with that. You can make him a brawler that has a mid-range blast that comes out of the gauntlet. Maybe some of his abilities involve the use of the Infinity Stones, right? Like maybe he has a teleport that's like the Space Stone. I have no idea how you would do the Time Stone, you know, in a way that's balanced. Again, you don't even have to incorporate all of the stones into his base gameplay. As long as his ult uses all of the stones, that's all that really matters. I think another way you could do Thanos that would be really interesting is like, as he gets kills throughout the match, he collects Infinity Stones off the corpses of people. So like he gets stronger the longer you play him and the more kills you get with him until, you know, you reach a... So maybe you even like don't give him an ult, right? He doesn't have an ultimate. It's just as you play him, you fill up the Infinity Stone gauge at the bottom, which replaces the ult meter. And instead of him having an ult, he just gets all the Infinity Stones, and for basically the rest of the match, he's using the Infinity Stones. Or maybe he like gets this empowered state for a short period of time where he can use the Infinity Stones, but he's still like walking around as a regular player. Think like an install from a fighting game, or a transformation or something like that. And then after a period of time, he loses the stones. Like the stones get scattered again, and he has to kind of collect them again by dealing more damage and playing the character for a while, right? I think that would be really cool. I think that would make him a really unique hero as well. I think that would also give him the ability to be like a high damage hero in the long term, even if he's more on the like neutral or weaker side when you first start. I don't know. You could be creative, right? It's Thanos, right? Be creative, have fun. Let's move on to the next hero. So next up, we have another one that I'm like, how is this guy not in the game? It's Drax. Come on, bro. Like, you have all of the other Guardians except Drax and Gamora. You even have Adam Warlock, who, like, for most of the people who are familiar with the Guardians, right, who aren't, like, comic book heads or anything like that, they've just been watching the MCU movies, which is, like, 90% of the player base, I would imagine, are people who just came from the MCU. Like, Drax was there from the start. Like, how do we have Groot, Warlock, Mantis, Rocket, and Star-Lord and not Drax? Think about it this way. If you want to play a team of all Guardians, you just want to play the Guardians of the Galaxy, you can't do that right now. And even if they added someone like Gamora, right, Gamora would probably be a DPS. So the team would be unbalanced, right? You would have Groot as your solo tank, Star-Lord as your DPS, Adam, Mantis, and Rocket as your supports. So like, that's only 5. And then Gamora would make your 6th player, but she would be a DPS. That's an unbalanced team because you only have 1 tank. If you made Drax a tank, you have a 2-tank team with a single DPS on Star-Lord and 3 supports that are high damage supports, right? So it's not like it's like a high sustain comp. It's high damage. You have Mantis on damage boost. Rocket is providing the major chunk of healing. Adam is providing a lot of DPS because he's mostly a DPS with an occasional heal. Star-Lord has insane DPS output. Groot has really high DPS output. And of course, Drax would be more of a brawler or even a dive kind of a tank, right? That would be so much fun to play, right? Like, in right now, that is the only themed team comp that is even possible right now, because there really isn't a group in the game that you can kind of gravitate towards that is designed that way. Like, you could maybe do the Avengers, right, with Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, Hawkeye, but it's like, we don't have, right, Black Widow, but we don't have supports, right, that are Avengers. So, like, you can't really build a balanced team around the Avengers because we don't have supports that are Avengers. Falcon might make an interesting support. Maybe we'll do a support video later on after this one. But yeah, Drax, no excuse. Please put Drax in the game. You could even give him like a fun, cool ability where it's like the slower he moves, or if he doesn't move, he turns invisible, like Invis Woman. Come on, that's funny. Is that balance? Is it useful? Because he's a tank, so he should always be moving? No, but it's funny and it's cool and it's unique. Put it in the game, it'll be cool. The one last thing on Drax is I feel like if the argument is whether or not you should have Drax, Nebula, or Gamora added to the game, I feel like Drax has better interactions with the rest of the cast as opposed to Nebula and Gamora, right? Like, at the start of the game when they're having their little banter in that room, I feel like Drax would have more interesting lines to say than Gamora and Nebula. That's just me, right? I don't know whether or not you would prefer Gamora, Nebula, or Drax. Let me know down in the comments, but me personally, I'm a Drax guy. I want Drax in the game. Alright, so the last character that is like a no-brainer, and I'm basically of the opinion, like, how did this make it past the beta and this person was not immediately added to the game as like the first character, is Deadpool. Now, a lot of people will probably say that Deadpool should just be a DPS, right? He should not be a Vanguard. However, my argument to that is we already have Wolverine, who is a DPS, who is supposed to be like immortal. He's supposed to have a healing factor that's very, very good. And I feel like they couldn't give him that level of like living up to his hero fantasy of being immortal and having very high healing factor because he's a DPS and his job is to just deal a bunch of damage. So the role he is in restricts him from being true to his like hero design or his hero fantasy, right? Instead, you just get like feral Wolverine instead of immortal Wolverine. I would very much not like to see that happen to Deadpool. As talented as Deadpool is as a fighter, he is the most well known for being immortal. And what better way to show he is immortal than making him a Vanguard, right? Giving him a bunch of health, giving him like passive regen as his main ability, right? It's not like crazy regen, but he just heals over time. So he can just, step behind a corner and he's just gonna heal up without his supports actively healing him. It's gonna take a few seconds, right? But he would be able to do that. Something like giving him a guard where he's like spinning his swords that blocks damage and stuff like that. Like, you can do that for Deadpool, even if it has a chance to like not block any damage, because Deadpool doesn't care, so the bullets still pass through most of the time anyway. You get what I mean, right? You can have fun with Deadpool. Give him a double jump, right? Make him like an acrobatic tank. In terms of his actual damage numbers, he's more along the lines of Hulk, where he just deals consistent damage, but it's not like big burst damage like Emma. Maybe even something like Cap, where like he feels like if you ignore him, he's gonna kill you, but his damage is not like, oh, this guy just dove me, like I'm gonna die in like 2 seconds, right? He's not built like that. He's more like a brawly, high mobility, acrobatic kind of tank. I think that would be really fun and really interesting. But I mean, honestly, but my biggest thing is just, how is Deadpool not in the game? Come on, he had debatably the most successful Marvel movie to ever be produced outside of like Endgame and Infinity War. You have Wolverine in the game. You have the costume for Wolverine that was in the Deadpool movie. Why is Deadpool not in the game? I just don't get it. Maybe it's a Disney thing. Maybe they're like, I don't know, we don't really want an M-rated character, right, or an R-rated character to be in this game that's supposed to kind of be for general audiences. But whatever the reason is, figure that out, because I really want to see Deadpool in the game, and I think it would be cool if he was a tank. So the next hero we're going to discuss is not one that is like, how is he not in the game? But it's one of those that is like, this would be really cool, and he's a fan-requested character, right? Like a lot of tank players have said this would be a good pick to add into the game. Of course, that's War Machine. Come on, baby, it's War Machine. Like it's not like this is Squirrel Girl. It's not like this is Jeff, where we're pulling him out of the bottom of the barrel of the Marvel universe, right? Like War Machine's been there since like Iron Man 2. Like, he's been a part of the MCU. This is not like this isn't a hero that people would be hyped to play, especially if you gave him the ability to fly. Now, I think the way that you make him balanced around his flight is he has Iron Man and Storm levels of flight, but he has a resource for his flight, kind of like Star-Lord, right? So he can fly around, he can move, kind of like Torch and stuff like that, but it drains the resource, just like Star-Lord's flight drains. And once the resource ends, he goes into like that floating mode where he floats down slowly. I think that would be a good way to balance him. I think this would be a great answer to flyers, right? So you have a lot of Iron Man players right now. There's a lot of Storm players still out there. Torch has been seeing a lot of play. People are realizing that the flyers are still pretty good and that you can still play flyers. And if people don't swap to deal with them, you just get to play for free, basically. Because many of the tanks just can't really deal with the flyers. Even though they gave Thing that flying haymaker that's supposed to knock flyers out of the air, because you can't angle the punch, right? Because Thing can't look up and angle the punch directly above him, hitting the jump haymaker to knock people out of the air is very difficult to do unless you time it properly, right? So giving us War Machine, a hero who could actually contest the flyers in the air as a tank, would be super, super good. You could also give him the properties of just being a long-ranged tank. We really don't have that outside of like Magneto, and even Magneto's range is more along the lines of like mid to long range. He's not really a full long range tank. War Machine, you could absolutely just make him a long range tank. Some things to note about his kit that would be really interesting or really cool. You could give him, if you come from Overwatch, you could give him like Orisa style firing rate for his turret, right, for the machine gun on his back, and make it function kind of like Bastion's assault mode, where he has to go into that mode. He has a limited amount of ammo. While he's in that mode, he can only be in the mode for a certain period of time, and then after that, it goes on a cooldown where his minigun has to recharge. Maybe it has to cool down, or maybe he needs to like reload it, and that's why it's offline for a few minutes, right? Or however many seconds the cooldown is. You get the idea. And then his primary fire, you could just make the repulsor blasts, right? Because it is based on the second Iron Man suit, right? The Mark II. So he still has like his long range poke, but his high damage mode comes from the minigun. And then you could give him the the shoulder mounted rockets, right? And just make them lock on the same way that like Juno can lock onto people with her torpedoes. You can do the same thing with War Machine. And I think done. That's it. I literally just made the character for you. If you think that's too broken, you can change the minigun to be his ult, right? And his primary is just his standard poke with the repulsor blasts, and then the rockets are like his secondary ability, and then he has the ability to fly. That's it. That's literally all you have to do, and I think War Machine would be fantastic. I think he'd be great. Give him like 600 HP. Give him like a dash so he can like get behind cover or something like that. The character's done, and it'd be a W. So absolutely, please add War Machine. Like out of all of the characters here, War Machine is like very close to the top that I think is like a must pick. If this character doesn't get added to the game at some point, it's absolutely a travesty. So in all honesty, this next pick probably should have been in the selection of like how was this character not included in the base game? It's Doom. Like we have 2 models for Doctor Doom already in the game. Like you know the cutscenes before and after the match starts, like you see the model that they have for Doom already in the game. There are 2 models for him. One is blue, one is green. He looks great. He looks fantastic. He looks beefy. Right? He looks like a chunky boy. He looks like he would make a fantastic Vanguard. Why is he not in the game? And it's not like Doom isn't like strong, right? It isn't as if you don't have a lot of material to draw off of for his moveset. Doom has like magic, he's got science, he's got drones and stuff like that. Like you could make a very interesting kit for Doctor Doom. The only excuse I'll accept for why Doom isn't in the game yet is they're likely saving him for next year sometime when they do, the Avengers movie with Doom. That makes sense, but I don't care. We really need tanks. We need tanks very badly right now. Doom would be a very hype tank. If you really wanted to get people to come play tank, Doom is a hype enough pick for people to come back and play tank. I place him on the same level as like Thanos. Like, people would show up to play tank just so they could play Doom in Thanos. So make that happen. At some point, I don't want to hear we can't do Doom, right? Or we're not going to add Doom to the game. Like, at some point, Doom needs to be put in the game. He's an iconic villain. He would make a fantastic Vanguard. You could even make him like something like a mirror to Doctor Strange, where he has like the energy shield or something like that. You can you got it, NetEase. I'm sure you'll cook, right? Because you've been cooking with the hero designs for the most part. So I'm sure you'll come up with something interesting. But just add Doom to the game. He needs to be in the game. Real quick, while we're on the topic of Doom and just like discussing whether or not he should be added to the game, there are some villains on this list, obviously, right? We went over Thanos. We just talked about Doom. I am of the belief that villains need to be one of the priority additions to this game. Galactica herself says, pick your hero or villain. I'm not judging. Adding more villains to the game would spice up the roster so much. And you have so many interesting villains to choose from, both for DPS, tank, and support, that I think it's, again, like a missed opportunity to not give people the option to play with some of the most iconic villains in Marvel in a game like this. Even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for these villains to be working together with the heroes to save the day, you can think about it kind of like the entire multiverse is at stake. If we don't fix this, everybody dies, and that's enough motivation for a lot of the villains to kind of lock in and work with the heroes, even if it is begrudgingly, right? At this point, Ultron is working with the main cast, so there is no excuse. Ultron is like one of the most, in terms of like villain who will not work with the heroes, it makes the most sense out of any villain to choose not to work with the heroes. It would be Ultron. So the fact that Ultron is willing to work with the heroes to save the day should be more than enough to justify any of the other villains. Well, maybe not any, because there are some pretty evil villains in Marvel, but you get the idea, right? Like, most of the villains should be willing to work with the heroes, and I think that would just make for a more interesting roster. But let's get back to the tanks, right? Sorry for the intermission. Okay, kind of a controversial pick for this next one. Captain Marvel. Specifically, yes, the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel. Now, I know for some people that's a spicy one. A lot of people don't like her, specifically her actress. But listen, she's popular in the MCU. Like, she's a big deal in the MCU. We wouldn't have beat Thanos without Captain Marvel showing up. So I kind of feel like, for the sake of history, you should probably put her in the game. I also just think she would make for a pretty bad tank hero, right? Like, she can fly. We need answers to flyers, so making a flying tank hero is pretty important. Once again, you can just give her the movement speed of like Storm in base, right? She doesn't have to be super fast, but instead of walking, she floats and flies. Maybe lower her HP pool so she's not like, Venom in the air where she's got like 800, or Groot where she's got like 800 HP in the air. That would be pretty ridiculous. But make her like 500, 550 HP, maybe 600 HP, right? And then she has her little energy blast that she can shoot, so she's more or less ranged. And then give her like a melee combo or something like that at close range. I don't know. You, again, be creative, right? I'm sure you can work it out. But I think, and I think another thing that I want to address, I probably should have did this earlier in the video now that I think about it, but another thing I want to address is some people might say, well, this person is too small to be a tank, right? It doesn't make sense based on their body type to be a tank. Body type does not mean anything to me when it comes to tank heroes in this game. Punisher is bigger than like 50% of the tank roster, and he's a DPS. I don't want to hear anything, right? Emma's model is about the same size as Invisible Woman and Luna Snow's. So again, I don't want to hear anything. Doctor Strange is not this big, buff, burly guy, right? He's a pretty thin sorcerer. So the fact that they made him a tank and Emma a tank, like, anyone can be a tank at this point. If they want to make you a tank, they'll make you a tank. Emma doesn't have any business being a tank. She should probably have just been a DPS. But they made her a tank, and it works. So if they want to make someone a tank, they can make them a tank, regardless of body type. That's kind of the philosophy that I'm going off of. So no, I don't think if they're going to add Deadpool, they need to make him a beefy, chunky boy, right, in order for him to fit the tank roster. He can be just kind of tall and muscular, but he's not, kind of like Cap, right? Maybe reduce the muscles on him just a little bit. But Cap is not like as big as the Thing or as big as Thor. He's kind of the same size as like Bucky for the most part. So again, size does not matter in regards to this video game. Let's move on to the next hero. All right, so next up is Ant-Man. Again, Ant-Man is an Avenger, right? He's one of the he's like an OG. How has Ant-Man not been added to the game? I get that the game's only been out for like 6 months, but I'm like, when you're coming up with heroes to fill the roster in for this, how do you not immediately go to like, okay, what are some of the more popular heroes? Ant-Man is pretty popular, right? He's got 3 movies. The third one wasn't, all that good, but you get my point, right? He's a pretty popular hero. He makes sense for being a tank. How you would make him work, I have no idea, and it's probably why they haven't added him to the game. Is they're probably like, there's no way we can make his ability to shrink and grow function in this game, especially as a tank. So maybe we should just leave him alone. And if that's the reason, I can kind of understand why he hasn't been added. But I still think it would be really cool. I'd love to see their take on Ant-Man. Even if it's just that like his ult is what makes him grow really huge, and he just like gets to step on people for a few minutes before he shrinks back down. That would be cool. Making it so that like in the mid-fight he grows, like not grows huge, but like he increases in size a little bit as he throws punches and stuff like that. Giving him a timer on his ability to like turn into a small little fly, and then he can like move around, but he can't deal damage to people, right? So he has some mobility. Again, you can make Ant-Man work. I think you can make Ant-Man work. But I can also understand if you decided it was too much work and you didn't want to make him work. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so the last really serious suggestion I have for a tank is Dr. Octavius. Now, some people might think that came out of left field, but really think about it, right? Doc Ock is genuinely pretty big, right? When you factor in his tendrils, right? The tentacles. And generally speaking, when you see Doc Ock in most comic books or movies, he's depicted as being, kind of not chunky as in fat, but like he's a thick boy, right? He's not skinny or anything like that. So from a visual standpoint, I know we just spent some time talking about how visuals don't matter, but from a visual standpoint, Doc Ock makes sense to be a tank, right? There's also just the fact that he's very durable, right? In lore, Spider-Man is like hitting this man, and Spider-Man's using a decent amount of his like true power to really put the pause on Doc Ock, and Doc Ock can take most of that, right? So it's not like he's fragile like someone like Electro or you know what I mean. He can take a beating, he can take some punches, but he can also dish out a lot of damage too. I think being able to like walk around with the tendrils, right, like with his tentacles and stuff, would be really cool. Having that like mobility of like being able to like walk on walls and stuff like that and walk on the ceiling kind of like Venom would be really cool. Of course, like his melee, he would be kind of brawly, right? His melee with the tentacles would be really interesting. Maybe giving him a grab, right? Just like how Emma has a grab, would give you a good option. Like if Emma is ever banned, you still have Doc Ock who can grab people. Maybe put his on like a longer cooldown or something like that. Like he's got the saw blades, right? That he can turn his little tentacles into. Like Doc Ock has some cool stuff in his kit that I think would be really interesting to see adapted for a game like this. He can block, right? You can just have the tentacles just block damage for him. If you need a shield, right? Like if you need to design them with a block or something, you can go crazy, right? Again, they made Thing work. They made a guy who is just a rock work in this game. I feel like you can make any hero work, especially someone like Doc Ock. I also think, Spider-Man is really popular. There's only like 3 Spider-Man reps in this game. Adding Doc Ock would be a really cool touch. I don't really think many of his the other members of his Rogues Gallery really work as tanks, other than like Kraven. Kraven would be a good pick as well. I think you can make him work as a tank, but I also think he works as a DPS. So, kind of iffy there. This was also a spot that I would have put someone like Rhino or Kingpin, but again, Rhino is kind of boring. He's kind of basic. Kingpin doesn't really have powers, so I just think the more interesting tank pick from Spider-Man would be Dr. Octavius, so that's what we went with. I mean, I don't know, I'm not like super deep into Spider-Man lore, but I think if you wanted to go for an iconic tank from the Spider-Man universe, Dr. Octavius is probably your best pick. Alright, so this is getting kind of long, so we're going to go through kind of a speed round of tanks that I just recommend be added at some point. These are not like must-have tanks, I just think they'd be kind of cool, and I'd like to see them added in. And this is, you can also think of this as a way of saying that, like, to anyone who is like, there's no picks for tanks, like the tank roster is pretty limited because there aren't good options for heroes who would make good tanks. Think of this speed round as like a way of saying you can make some tanks work, right? There are characters that could work as tank. First up is Sandman. I know we just talked about Dr. Octavius and Spider-Man reps, but you can make Sandman work as a tank. I also think you can make him work as a support or DPS, so that's why I didn't include him over Doc Ock, just because I think he works in kind of any of the roles. But Sandman would work if they decided to give us Sandman as a tank. Next up is Crimson Dynamo. I love Iron Man. Crimson Dynamo is an Iron Man antagonist. I like to see villains added to this game. Crimson Dynamo, generally speaking, when you see his design, or its design, because a lot of people have worn that armor, it tends to be kind of big, it gets bulky, right? That could work as a tank for the most part, right? If you didn't want to do War Machine because you think War Machine is too basic, Crimson Dynamo would be a really interesting pick, especially for the people who are maybe like not super well versed in the comics and they only watch the MCU stuff, just like how we brought Jeff and Squirrel Girl, right? This is an interesting kind of lesser known pick that I think would be really cool to see added to the game. Of course, while we're talking about Iron Man, there's the Hulkbuster. I mean, I understand Tony is in the game already, right? Iron Man's already in the game, but you could do some interesting stuff with the Hulkbuster, of course. Like, it's got the repulsor blasts, it can brawl like Hulk can, it has limited flight, right? If you didn't want to do Rhodey or, Crimson Dynamo, Hulkbuster works too. Another way you could make Hulkbuster work is if Iron Man is not picked as a duelist, his voice will be coming out of the Hulkbuster, so it's like he's piloting it. But if Iron Man is on the same team as a Hulkbuster, it's Jarvis piloting the Hulkbuster instead of Iron Man. Or it would be someone like Happy, right? You can make it work, you can make it interesting. Is that a little bit more work than maybe it's worth to do the Hulkbuster? Maybe, but I think the Hulkbuster is cool, and I think a lot of people think the Hulkbuster is cool, so adding it to the game and putting that little extra flair would be kind of nice. While we're talking about Hulk, She-Hulk? I mean, look, the game already kind of has that stigma of being like a gooner game. I know people don't like She-Hulk all that much because of her TV show, but I mean, maybe it's just me. I think she's hot in terms of the comic version of the character. I think you would sell a decent amount of skins if you had a big, buff, strong, dominant mommy picking people up and throwing them across the map. I'm just saying, I think you could make She-Hulk work as a tank, and I think it would be kind of interesting. And I also think you would sell a lot of skins. So, just something to consider. Of course, you also have Juggernaut. If you wanted to throw in some more X-Men reps. I mean, come on, he's the Juggernaut. You already have Magneto as a tank. Having Juggernaut complement him as the second X-Men rep tank would be, well, I mean, you have Emma, but you know what I mean, right? Another X-Men rep that like identifies with Magneto more than Emma does. I think Juggernaut would be really cool. Again, him being able to like pick people up, throw them out, break their backs or something like that. Have fun with it. He's Juggernaut. Make him huge. It'd be a lot of fun to play as Juggernaut in a game like this. We also have Luke Cage, right? Like, I mean, the only problem I have with Luke Cage is just that he would play, I imagine he would play more like Thing and Hulk, so he would just kind of be another really big, strong tank that just kind of brawls. So I feel like that's not like all that interesting. But again, the hero design team can cook. So, and I'm not like super deep in Luke Cage lore, so maybe he's got some crazy shit that you can do with his character and pull from to make his moveset. I don't know, but go crazy. I just think he'd be an interesting rep to throw in there if you were looking for another tank rep. And then finally, we have Miss Marvel. Yeah, Kamala. I mean, again, she can increase the size of her like body parts, right? She can make her fists huge. She can expand herself, right? She's kind of like Mr. Fantastic. She can stretch and all that. Like, you can make her work as a tank. I'm sure you could. The only problem is you really couldn't do the Gooner thing with her because, she's a kid. So, and it's probably not a good look to have World Breaker Hulk transform, grab Kamala, and slam her into the ground and stomp on her, given the fact that she's a teenager or a kid. So maybe that one is a little iffy. Maybe they don't do that. But, if you wanted to do like an adult version of Miss Marvel with the same powers, I think she could work as a tank. I think you could make some interesting, design choices for her as a tank. But that about wraps up this video. Next up, we're probably going to do supports next, just because I think there's a decent amount of characters that would function well as support, and we desperately need some new support characters. Like, at this point, we don't need any more DPS. I love DPS, right? I think there's a lot of heroes that will work well as DPS, but I want to see tanks and supports first. So after Blade, no more DPS, give us some tanks and give us some supports. Maybe like 3 new tanks and 3 new supports, and then we can go back to adding in, a DPS or 2 here and there. But thank you for watching. Thank you for sitting through this rather long video of recommendations. And hey, if I missed a tank, or I missed a character that you thought would make for a good tank, let me know down in the comments section below. I'm genuinely curious to hear what you have to say and what heroes you have, to recommend me. And who knows, maybe, we talk about this enough. Maybe some of these heroes get added to the game. Just a thought. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Take care and have a good day.